First up, the disclaimer. Nothing in this video is intended as financial advice. Please pause the video now and read the disclaimer in full. For complete transparency, I haven't been paid any compensation for this interview, nor do I hold any equity or tokens related to the company discussed. If you're encountering this video and you haven't yet learned about security tokens, click in the top right now and it will take you to my educational series so you can learn step by step what security tokens are and why I believe they're going to be so influential over the next 12 months. Without any further ado, let's begin with the interview.
Do you want to just briefly outline exactly what it is Securitize do?
Yeah, no problem. So a question I get frequently is, what is it that you do at Securitize? And I usually start by explaining what we don't do, right? So two of the things we don't do is raise money and or act as lawyers. So we don't do any of those things. We are totally focused on being a technical service provider. So we just provide technology to companies that want to onboard investors in the proper way, issue a security to those investors that they can then own themselves in any standard Ethereum kind of wallet. And then they provide them the infrastructure so that they can do compliant trading. And what we mean with compliant trading, quite simply, is there's a lot of rules that govern how a token can move, who can own it, and how it can be traded. And we enforce those rules so that neither the issuer nor the investor is doing something inappropriate. Issuer in this context is a company that's selling a security to an investor. The security can represent a number of different things. Thus far at Securitize, we've done real estate, like single asset real estate investment trusts, which is the Aspen coin is the best known one. We did that. We've done venture capital funds like Blockchain Capital, Spice VC, 22X, Science. And then we've done other more interesting projects like securitized revenue streams. So like with lottery.com, it's a dividend paying token. And so you're getting a piece of a global charity raffle that they run. And so there's a number of different kind of types of offerings. And what's neat about this space is you can create whatever it is you want to create in terms of your offering, as long as investors want to buy it. And within that guide frame, kind of guardrails, you're pretty much okay to do whatever you like. You have to disclose everything. Everything has to be clear and transparent, but that's about it.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, the ability to program assets, as you say. So it doesn't just have to be a typical boring share in a company. Now, you touched on something that I'm really quite interested in, and that's what you think is going to be the first point of disruption. So some people are creating you could argue VC style financing for companies. That's one use of security tokens. You could tokenize real estate. You could tokenize debt, derivatives. There's virtually unlimited possibilities. What are you finding is being taken up first?
Well, I mean, I think there's some things make a lot of sense and make sense for different types of investors. So you have to think about kind of where we are in sort of the continuum of this new asset class being created. So with ICOs, what most investors wanted was the ability to pick a winner and invest in that, okay? Mm-hmm. That's exceptionally difficult to do in the real world. Very few people are able to do it. And for the most part, there's like 90% lock-in, right? So whilst people may want that, and that's what we thought there would be a lot of, those aren't actually the most successful offerings to date. Kind of the more successful offerings are when investors who like to invest get access to a new asset class. Mm-hmm. So traditionally, me as an individual, I can't go and buy $10,000 worth of a venture capital fund. That doesn't happen. Doesn't exist. So now that product exists, and that's a really good one, because then you have professional investors that are essentially offering the ability for you to invest in their portfolio. And if you look at like a Spice VC, right? So if you invested in their initial offering at the full price, not even at any of the 2 discounts they did, you were buying it at $1 a token. Mm-hmm. The last NAV, net asset value, that they reported was like $1.60. Mm-hmm. And so, or sorry, $1.37 in their case, sorry. And so, you that's a huge lift, like being up 37% right away. That's fantastic, right? Mm-hmm. And those are great returns. I think that the ICO investors looking for different style of return, and so they're not in this space at all. So we don't see any sort of traditional ICO investors in the security token space, and that's been one of the kind of big learnings over the past year. Is like, oh well, these people who made a ton of money in these amazing flips that they did will want to buy real assets with that crypto. That is nothing. They do not buy these.
So are you finding it's more people coming from traditional backgrounds, moving from equity type backgrounds into this space instead?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main kind of larger checks have come, like when they go into companies or in startups, they're coming from experienced investors that are comfortable with this new asset class. In many cases, it's family offices right now. And a family office is just like a, it's like a new word that's kind of popped up over the past few years. It's just kind of really rich people who have the ability to deploy capital into projects. And they may do it through a fund vehicle, and they may just do it directly through a check.
That's actually an interesting kind of thing we're brushing on then. I was going to ask what you find is the typical reaction that you encounter when you try to explain tokenization and security tokens. So for you and me, it's so simple. It's just taking the old system of trading and making it better in every way possible. You said before the call, it's like mail versus email. Why would you go back to the analog way? But are you encountering that sort of reaction with other people, or do institutions find this quite difficult to get on board with the idea of?
I'd say, so they definitely people find it difficult to get involved with. And the reason they find it difficult to get involved with is because we've been using the wrong words. Okay, so we in the crypto world spend a lot of time talking about wallets and how you're going to secure this and what's a private key. All of those things are just all they do is create fear. They create zero value for an investor. Okay, so what we're trying to do this year, and we've started to do it from last year, which is move away from the word token, and we started talking about digital securities, because that's really what they are at the end of the day. And then from there, get rid of this word wallet. Wallet is a pariah to the growth of this industry. The word wallet shouldn't exist. It's an account. Okay, you have an account with your bank, with your investment company. That's what you have. You don't have wallets. Okay, they could call it wallet if they wanted to. It has the same security features. They may be implemented a little bit differently, but these are wallets. They're not wallets. They're just accounts, right? And that's where you're going to put your money. You put your money into an account. And so from an investment point of view, I think that's one of the fundamental shifts is figuring out the right words to be able to communicate with investors in a way that they understand. And it's a huge task, because once you get deep down the rabbit hole of crypto, it becomes super interesting to use all of these new words, but they actually reduce the value of what you're doing.
So if you use those words, do you then find a different reaction? What kind of uptake are you finding when you put it in terms people can understand?
Well, I mean, from our point of view, it's kind of just starting right now. And so we've been re-engineering everything we're doing around that. And so we'll see over the next 6 months how that plays out. And you'll see all of our kind of marketing materials, websites, everything we do kind of shift to much more finance-centric language. But I can tell you this, we've been working with IBM for the past 2-3 months now on a project. And when we go in and we say, listen, we can fix clearance and settlement, we can make it so that transfer of funds is instantaneous, that there's a fully auditable trail of the transactions. All that stuff is super appealing. And then the word wallet shows up and people are like, oh, no, I'm out. It just takes one word, because they want all of the benefits that blockchain provides for traditional financial assets. And this is a true modernization of that entire ecosystem that's going on through blockchain. And there's a lot of great companies involved with it. And so, it's this kind of thing we're going through step by step down this path. And, I think it'll be, in 5 years' time, we'll look back and be like, oh my God, this was so ridiculous. Like, remember when we had to explain to people that their money was safer because there was an audit trail that was visible on a public blockchain forever? And they'll be like, oh yeah, of course. Like, why would we ever just want a random piece of paper somebody sent me in the mail?
Well, you threw out a timeline there, so I'm going to go ahead and make you pull out your crystal ball. We've overcome some of the technological issues over the past 12 months. If you wind the clock back, there wasn't really many issuance platforms. There wasn't liquidity on exchanges. There weren't even exchanges open. So we've taken significant technical steps, but there's still kind of an understanding element and some demand which is required within the industry. Are you finding that I don't want to push you on it's going to be picked up by 2 years, but what are your thoughts on the kind of timeframes you're looking at?
So I think, I can look at it from the point of view of fundraising for our own business, right? And so when you look at your own business and how long you think you need to be around for the product market to fit to align,
Yeah.
that's a good barometer, right? So, people will stand out there and say, oh, it's, 5 to 10 years out. That's because have no money on the line. They're not actually doing it.
Yeah.
Okay. If we don't make this happen, our business doesn't exist in 5 years' time, right? And so from a functional, let's think about actual execution, rubber meets the road type of thing.
Yep.
We set up our last round of financing to give us at least 2 years of working capital.
Mm-hmm.
So we think it's going to take at least 2 years to get to some real product market fit.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Like, it's great to be a little bit early. Realistically, could it be longer? Sure. But I mean, we've got plenty of customers out there today that are happy with their product. We've new investors coming into the asset class, and it's going to be slow. But it'll happen much faster than we expect it once it starts happening.
Have you found a slowdown at all? Bitcoin's dropped from $20,000 to about $4,000 today. Presumably there's just less funds in the market, even though they shouldn't be correlated. We're kind of talking before, they instinctively are because the word blockchain just means.
Yeah.
Have you found a link between the two?
So if I look at our kind of pipeline of inbounds, no, factually, no. We feel like we'll be able to double our business this year from last year. Last year was a great year. For first year, we made money, and that's, in this space, is unusual.
Yeah.
And so, I think this year, it's speeding up. The quality of the issuers is getting better. The questions are getting deeper in terms of how things work, and the features that customers are looking for are getting more advanced. And it's an evolutionary thing, right? So right now, a digital security is better than a public share of stock today that you can buy, right? But it isn't better than a Series A round financing transaction.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit different.
Okay, that's interesting to hear that it's not slowed down. I know they're not related, but I also encounter so many people that think they're related that I assumed there would have been some sort of negative impact as a result. But that's fantastic to hear.
Well, remember, we never did anything in the ICO or crypto world.
Yeah.
So my point of view is biased to just pure digital securities.
Mm-hmm.
When we started doing this, everyone thought we were nuts.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they were like, why would you do this? There's so much easy. And so now I see every ICO firm on the planet switching, and now they're an STO issuance platform, and they're the best, and they win, and they've done 70 deals. None of that is true. Nobody has done 70 of anything in this space.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Like, there are more security token standards than there are issued security tokens.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So, all of that stuff that you see is absolute just rubbish. Just forget about it.
Yeah, well, speaking of competition then, how would you compare yourselves to other players in the space?
Well, normally, the companies that we get asked about are Polymath and Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
And so, from our point of view, Polymath is very much kind of the granddaddy of this industry, one of the real first players that created it. A lot of respect to them for that. And they're kind of build your own kind of product.
Yeah.
So you can go in there and you kind of create your own thing. It's a lot of manual, probably appealing to a smaller company or very, very technical teams. Somebody like Harbor has a really good product. I think, they've got an offering that's coming out there. Hopefully we'll see that get issued in the next few months. Their model is different from ours because we provide a truly decentralized transfer agent on the blockchain,
Mm-hmm.
where we don't control it as an entity. Whereas in their scenario, they are a centralized point, and they control that kind of transaction. So that is a risk. I imagine they'll address it in a future release. They have a great team. We know Josh there really well. A lot of compliments to those guys. So, and this in finance, it's not a winner take all market. So This isn't the battle of the protocol. That's not a thing. The reason you need a protocol is because you actually need a way to trade these things. And there is no way to do it that's, has any scale.
Mm-hmm.
We get sometimes a little bit of guff about the fact that we haven't open sourced our protocol.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a reason we haven't done it. It's because we have to keep evolving it as the market evolves and changes.
Mm-hmm.
We frequently have to do updates and changes. We're doing multiple integrations with multiple exchanges right now. And I can tell you, not everything has been thought about as to how things work. One exchange might think that they do it this way, and the other one's going to do it this way. And so you have to kind of encapsulate all of those different features. And if I need to go back to a committee to get my change approved, this industry won't happen. So everybody's hoping for a standard. Forget about it. Build, deploy, get scale, and then, just like the web, naturally standards will evolve and things will become like kind of focused on a few different things.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And at the end of the day, if you're a startup in an entirely new industry, you have to remain nimble. If you try and fix yourself into one thing, it's never going to work. Now, you mentioned exchanges there. That's a particularly interesting point because much of the promise of security tokens is the ability to trade them on secondary exchanges and provide liquidity to previously illiquid markets. For me, at least, without that, there's some benefits, but they're relatively minor in comparison to what that is. So which exchanges are you working with? And how does the integration process work? So I'm thinking here, for example, you guys run cap table management. How does that automatically update when someone goes on a security token exchange and then makes a trade?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So we have about 15, I'd say, marketplaces and exchanges that have signed memorandums of understanding to deploy our digital securities protocol. So what that means is that they're going to do a technical integration, particularly around the transmission of data around a specific investor back to the issuer. Okay. So whilst a large piece of what we do is on-chain, around identity and wallets and all those pieces are all on-chain, one of the off kind of chain components is you can't, like if one of the three-letter organizations around the world shows up and is like, we need to know who owns this wallet. You can't give them a hashed identity and be like, here you go. That's not going to work, okay? So what you need to provide them is name, address, their proof of accreditation, you know, when they bought this, how they purchased it, all of the transaction history, give them their documents. Everything a regulator would want to see, you need to have ready. So that's how the integration works with the exchanges. There's actually an API where they're able to pass data back to the issuer and sync up a, sorry to say this, offline database. But it works and it meets the requirements of the regulation. So whilst all the trading and the approvals and everything is automated on-chain, there is a data exchange that happens off-chain. And so if you as an investor go on to, you know, Open Finance today and were to buy Blockchain Capital's token, once you make the purchase, what happens in the background is your data is passed to Blockchain Capital so that they have it in their issuer database, so they know who all their investors are. The cap table is obviously updated based on your holdings. And then you'll actually get an email from Blockchain Capital saying, hey, thanks for becoming an investor. Click here to log into your account. And then you'll be able to log into your account. You'll be able to see the original offering documents. You'll get any investor updates. You'll see the portfolio. You know, all the information that an investor would want will be available to you through an online portal that's and your account's automatically created in the background, which is actually really cool. You don't get that when you buy a share of Apple. You don't get an email from Apple being like, hey, thanks for buying a share. You should check out our last prospectus. That doesn't happen. Whereas in the security space, it will.
That is one of the really incredibly kind of mind-blowing features, the ability to program things like that into a share, which has never been possible in the past. Like you mentioned Apple, a great example. You could literally program, if someone's held Apple shares for 5 years, now they get a 10% discount in stores. We're going to see potentially this entire growth of shares as they previously were, but then all different ridiculous types of shares which could spawn out of this. What do you think about that?
Well, you know, it's an interesting debate, right? So we hear this a lot. People are trying to come up with super innovative new models. I'm all for that. But first, make sure your deal is good.
Yes.
Okay. So frequently, if you take what is not a good investment and you try to put lipstick on a pig, it's still not a good investment. So just because you have the most innovative crypto-centric model doesn't mean that anyone's going to buy it. And by the way, in this space, you know, coming up with really interesting crypto models, people don't understand. They don't buy those. They're not in that market. And so it's somewhat counterproductive. Like I had a phone call with a customer or with a potential customer yesterday, and they said, oh, well, you know, we were thinking about doing this complex model of, you know, this type of economy. And when this thing happens, that'll happen. I'm like, okay. Who's going to buy this? And they were like, what do you mean? I'm like, who's going to buy your product that you're inventing? This really complex thing, which I mean, to be fair, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I couldn't understand. And they're like, oh, well, we're going to sell it to traditional investors. I'm like, no, they're not going to buy this. Maybe a crypto investor will buy it. And then they said, well, at the end of the day, actually, all we want to do is pay a dividend and be able to destroy any tokens that, you know, once we've had the dividends. I'm like, oh, okay. You want to do a share buyback? Cool, no problem. So you want a dividend and a share buyback? Yes, great, we can do that. And that's the shift that has to happen is a lot of these mechanisms exist, and people think they're inventing new things, but they're not. They just don't understand how traditional financial markets have worked. And so, again, this gets back to my earlier point about the words we use. We talk about economics and crypto economics and economic models and this. Forget about that. Look at what companies do and see if your model can fit into that and have a really good investment, and you'll be more successful than inventing a new thing right now. Yeah. Because there's enough new stuff that's been created.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, explaining security tokens to people to begin with is already crazy enough that if you try and add 10 different layers to it, it's just going to confuse people.
Agreed.
So you guys are built on top of Ethereum.
Yep.
And there's some security token specific blockchain protocols emerging at the moment. What do you guys think about those?
They're bad ideas. I mean, I don't know. I mean, from our point of view,
why is that?
Well, because you have no infrastructure. Again, so let's look at I don't know, pick any random blockchain out there. Custodian. Do you have a custodian for that? A regulated, insured, approved custodian to hold this new asset? Probably not. Do you have a marketplace to trade it on? Probably not. Because right now, all of the infrastructure is Ethereum. That's where the scale is. Now, we as a company understand that that's not going to be the future forever. And in fact, we've announced working with IBM on Hyperledger Fabric. We've announced we're working with Tezos. So whilst we're super interested in progressing it, the market isn't there yet. And what's taking a lot of time in this space is getting this basic infrastructure operational that you need for financial transactions. Like a large institutional investor can't hold securities directly. It's illegal for them to do that. They need a custodian. They have to be, and the custodian has a certain set of rules that they have to comply with. And it's in its infancy, right? Stuff just isn't there.
Do you see it having potential in the future? Or is it just, as you say, like teething problems from day one, overcomplicated, but could be big in the future? Or is it fundamentally not an improvement?
Another blockchain?
Yeah, like a blockchain which maybe bakes compliance into the code from day one, or is just built in a way which is specific for security tokens. Because you could look at Ethereum and say that could have issues in the future. What if you have another CryptoKitties?
Yeah. So if you have another CryptoKitties, it wouldn't really be a problem for security trading, but because the volumes it's not that dramatic. But
if it were to grow in the future, that could then become an issue.
Sure, but don't you think that, and I'm not trying to shill Ethereum here, but don't you think that the largest developer community in the world, of all the best developers who are focused almost exclusively on Ethereum, will solve that? I mean, that's what I have to assume. I'm not saying that that's the long-term solution, but that is where the focus is from the development community. I'm sure that EOS and Tezos and a number of XRP has some really interesting stuff. Those guys will all have pieces to play in the puzzle. And Ethereum may be superseded by something, but at the end of the day, from our point of view, we know who owns what. And if something much better comes along, it's easy enough to burn all the tokens on Ethereum and issue them onto another chain without any drama. So, it's not crypto. It's the blockchain serves as a ledger to keep track. And I like to explain it as kind of triple entry accounting. Who your accountant is not as important as that they be trustworthy. So once you find, if there's a better accountant that works better for you, we can use that. No big deal. But I think that's probably a few years out.
Okay. What kind of a process would that be then? So you said you could burn the tokens, reissue them on a new blockchain.
Not
is that relatively simple, or is that quite difficult?
Yeah. So it's a good question about, how do you actually move from one chain to another? And I would say that the best way to explain that is really what we've done with some of our token upgrades that we've done for customers already. So if I look at somebody like a Blockchain Capital or a Science, and essentially what you do is you take the old contract, the Ethereum contract, you freeze it. At that point, you take a snapshot of all the holders. Then you're able to burn that kind of smart contract, assuming you have the right keys for it. And then you can issue the new securities based on that snapshot on a new blockchain and issue and people can come and claim their tokens later. So, with if you understood kind of how the EOS mechanism worked, where you bought them essentially on Ethereum and then later registered a wallet, which is super complex, and then eventually got your real EOS tokens delivered to you. It would be much easier than that, but it's conceptually the same thing.
How does it work for you guys though, building out the protocol onto that new blockchain? So I understand the moving everyone over, but from your perspective, building from the ground up again.
Well, yeah. So this is, I have to give a lot of kudos to Jorge and Shine, our development team, and kind of they have a much more pragmatic approach. So we started with Ethereum, they figured that one out, and now we're doing Hyperledger with IBM. We kind of sorted that one out, and then we're starting to work with Tezos, which is again a different kind of environment than those other two environments. And so by the time we've done 3 different chains, we're pretty confident we'll know how to do kind of any blockchain that comes online. So let me get back to you about that later. But I think, our approach is very pragmatic, and we've been able to port from one to another already. So, eventually, we'll solve for that problem.
Okay, that makes a ton of sense. I'm actually out of questions. So the final question is simply, if you'd like to leave the audience with a message, it could be crypto, blockchain, Securitize, security tokens, whatever you like to say. What do you want to say?
I would say don't give up in the space and the time, right? And so right now is a challenging moment in crypto. Everyone's kind of waiting for this next bull run of crypto. From our point of view, actually, low crypto prices are quite a good thing. And one of the reasons they're good is because we use Ethereum as a platform, right? As it's designed to be used, not as a platform for speculating currency, but as a platform for running applications. Mm-hmm. So if it became more expensive to deploy an app to an app store each time more people started to use it, I probably wouldn't deploy many things there. Mm-hmm. And that is one of the challenges with Ethereum at this point, and probably a more fundamental challenge to any of the technology is this business model that they have and they've engineered into it. So I think that will end up being the unraveling of that piece, because you can't, if you used Amazon Web Services to run your servers, and the more services you use, the more expensive it got, you wouldn't use that anymore. You'd find something else. Mm-hmm. So, it's now is a good time to be building. Now is a good time to be executing and delivering and to learn. And as we go through that process, the market will evolve, but there's going to be a ton of failures in the middle, and it'll be really easy to get totally disheartened. I went to business school here in the US, and the number one thing, the only difference between kind of successful entrepreneur and a failure is the failure gave up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a powerful message, especially with all the potentially huge things coming within this industry, which you guys are a part of. So that is, thank you so much for joining me, Jamie. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom.